Hey everybody, it's Brian Hunt. Welcome to another episode of Risk On, Risk Off. Um, Thanks for being available to reschedule. We had a little technical difficulties at the beginning of the show earlier in the day, but I think we got all cleared out. But as I say, I've doing risk and insurance most of my adult life, and as I've learned that not everything goes the way you plan, so you got to overcome the adapt and have your backup plan. So thanks for coming back, and I'm sure today we're going to have a lot better technical issues, less technical issues than earlier in the day. So as we know, we talk a lot about risk and its different facets, its different functions here, with a heavy concentration in construction and real estate. And when it comes to construction, there are a lot of different things that come into play and a lot of different parties are involved. And we often say, with a developer, he's got that idea, whether it be a building or a municipality that wants to build a bridge or a school. They got an idea that got to make it happen. Then you bring in an architect to come up with some drawings, some renderings, some concepts, what it should look like, and that's great. And then you'll get the general contractor to come in with all his army of subcontractors to do the actual work. But when you're going from vision to reality, what has to happen is also making sure that however you build it actually can be built and it's going to stand up and stand the test of time. And it's going to withstand certain factors, whether it be seismic activity, high wind, high temperatures, whatever the case may be. You got to make sure it's actually going to work. So going from dream to reality, and that's where engineering comes into play. And so it's with this topic we're going to talk today. We're going to really dive into the history, what is the engineering industry all about? When do engineers get involved, and how they can be very critical to a job project, not only once the project's been done, but going into the future if something happens down the road. And so to help me to sort of shed a light on the world of engineering and building materials, I've got the distinct pleasure of having my friend come on, Mr. Michael Herman with Fenagh Engineering.
Michael, how you doing, Brian?
Michael, how are you, sir? Good.
Doing.
Good to have you here. Good to have you here. I know we had some technical difficulties earlier in the day and got a little disrupted by the local police department, but I think we're all good to go.
Yeah, I appreciate you covering for my inabilities to be technically savvy.
No, good. No worries, Michael. So obviously, thanks for coming on. And obviously, we're just looking forward to this conversation, talking about a concept we haven't covered yet here on the show. But one thing I'd like to talk about first before we get further down the road is I think I was telling you, I like to ask my guests, if we're playing the old game, where in the world is Carmen Sandiego? Is it fair to say that Michael Herman is in Austin, Texas today?
Yes, I am.
Very good.
Beautiful Austin, Texas.
Which is obviously growing like a weed, which we want to cover too as well. So, Michael, before we get into it, let's just kind of talk about your background first. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, we talked about this. I think you're from Houston area originally, correct?
That's correct. I was born in Miami and then moved to Houston when I was 4 because not many opportunities in Miami for a 4-year-old. My parents moved. I had to go.
Yeah.
Was raised there. Ended up was very blessed to get into the Houston Fire Department. Served 26 years there, fighting fire and saving lives. Retired, and I always said if I could make a living in Austin, Texas, I was coming.
Yeah.
So I took a fire chief job in one of the local ESDs. There are smaller departments that are around the metropolis of Austin that provide public safety to those areas. And I took a fire chief's job there. And then after about 3 or 4 years, had enough of that because the politics is even worse in smaller communities as in a big community.
Okay.
And then got into construction, started building things, building restaurants and that type of thing. And then hooked up here recently with Fenagh Engineering 3 years ago.
Fantastic. So obviously I want to talk about what, the engineering process and what is involved, but let's love it because you've got a very distinct background that sort of ties into actually engineering. That is obviously your time in working in fire and health and safety.
Yes, sir.
Now, obviously you probably ran into a lot of buildings that were on fire that everybody else was running out, or you probably saw a lot of things that happened.
Yeah. I'm always running into things people are running away from. That's for sure. And like I always say, I burned things down for 26 years, and now I get to be a part of building new things. And I know there's a lot of disgruntled people that don't like fire inspections or codes or whatever, but as we're seeing over time, and even individuals, civilians, what we call civilians, can see there's not as many house fires. And then when you have a large structure fire, like in a major building, a commercial building, it's pretty contained for the sprinkler systems and the codes and the things that we've implemented and put into place to prevent the spread of fire.
So that's a really good, that's a great point, Michael. So maybe we can talk a little bit about that, which I think ties into engineering and what we talked about is trying to reduce the potential or catastrophic event from happening. Let's circle back, 30 years ago when you're working initially in firefighting.
Yes.
And how would you describe and maybe walk us through the progression, like what those buildings looked like that you were running into 30 years ago and the types of fires that you might see 30 years ago versus to what you might have seen more recently, in the sense that you made the comment that you don't see as many house fires as much as you used to, which I'd like to know more why I think that is. And then to the point also with industrial fires or industrial events, have you seen in your career over 30 years, were they getting less severe? And maybe you could talk about as far as, what you're seeing as far as improvement in engineering or code, whatever the case may be, that you think justifies that.
Well, I think it's a combination, and we'll touch on residential real quick first.
Okay.
We're seeing such a reduction in house fires is because you have fire stops into walls. They're using 5/8 sheetrock, and they're using, like before, you would have a typical townhouse structure, a multifamily structure, and the code at that time, 35 years ago, is you had to have a parapet wall that extended up through the roof to separate the two different townhouses.
Okay.
Now what they're doing is they're sprinkled, which is life-saving, and they're also using double 5/8 inch sheetrock, so you have that on both sides of the wall, so you have just an impenetrable fire stop basically for at least 3 hours.
Yeah.
Different codes that happen. How much it's changed. 30 years ago, I tried to get the Home Builders Association to put in sprinklers into homes because we don't have to do the same things in houses that you do in commercial. I have to have check valves. You don't have to have different related pumps and things that you have in a commercial building. All we were asking is that they put on the same water system, which could be PVC, three total sprinkler heads, which amounted about $600 at that time. One in the kitchen, one in the garage, and one in the bathroom downstairs, because that was under the ISO insurance service offices. That's where a majority of the fires were happening. Yeah. So we were trying to prevent them. So the construction in the houses and the sheetrock and the fire stops that they're doing, everything they're doing with UIL as far as the flame spread on retardant materials that you're putting into these houses, it all comes to a point now to where we're seeing in smoke detectors, CO2 detectors, we're seeing these things that's early warning, notifying people, getting them up so they can actually take action or get out of their house safely.
Yep.
So we're seeing that. Now on the commercial side, so much has changed, as you know, and when you get into a commercial building, you're using metal studs, you're using 5/8 sheetrock. And basically, realistically, Brian, if you look at it, what's going to burn?
Yeah.
The content. I mean, the concrete, unless a plane flies into it, steel and concrete's not going to burn.
Yeah.
It's going to be pretty resilient to the fire. Like in hotels, you have a 3-hour solid core wood door on these hotel rooms, and they're designed for that purpose, where if there is a fire that breaks out of that room, you shut the door. It's not going anywhere. It'll go out the window, and then you've got to worry about your curtain wall of it going up the side of the building and that type of thing. So, but it buys the fire departments time to be able to get in, hook into their standpipe systems and their sprinkler system, and be able to make an attack on that fire.
Yeah.
So we have two types of attacks. You have a defensive mode. You have offensive. Offensive is where you go in from the unburned side, you ventilate the building properly, and you make an attack on that fire. A defensive mode is what you don't want, is where hope you got insurance because we're going to surround it and drown it.
Yeah.
So, but a lot of these things that have come into play that fire inspectors and the insurance offices have done have not been to wreak havoc on the builders or the homeowners or the people buying these facilities and these houses. It's for life safety.
Yeah.
And that's it.
And Michael, you're really you're hitting a lot of key points here, which I try to talk to with clients. I think that's sort of the takeaways here as far as risk management. First of all, I think this is really going to be tie into that we talk about what's going to happen in the future. So you rewind the clock 20, 30 years ago, and they were using maybe they're using the materials at that time that maybe people thought was affordable and made sense. but with studies and you improve the codes,
Correct.
now you're building with better materials, more resilient materials, which that unto itself, it seems like you've seen anecdotal direct evidence. The newer buildings with the new grade materials aren't as susceptible to a catastrophic event as they say where the older buildings were. So
correct.
And so and that's a result of better understanding what happens. You do the science, that they do the testing, and you're using more resilient information and based on the codes. And I think I would be sure if I went back and went and looked at sat in on hearings for code improvements, I'm sure somebody was complaining about it's going to cost too much and we shouldn't do that. But I think that's a key thing here. We're talking, and we're going to hit back on this, is that to be resilient is an investment, and to design it better and use better materials, it might cost more, but it makes you less resilient to catastrophic events down the road. I mean, I think you're singing the same thing I'm here, but would you agree with that statement?
Absolutely. But I'll give you an example of how all the codes and everything that we can try to do, people are still stuck on the dollar amount. And when you're talking about dollar amount versus life, we can all say, oh, it's not even an option, but it is, because I'll give you an example. In 1981 building code, 1981 for commercial residential high-rise buildings was that the common areas had to be sprinkled. The public areas or the private areas did not have to be sprinkled. So give an example, go back to 2001 of October, excuse me, we had a twin tower of our own in Houston that caught fire. It was called the Four Leaf Towers. They caught fire, and fire spread pretty quickly up onto the 5th floor. We were able to contain it, but we still lost a firefighter and a civilian.
Mm-hmm.
So after the fire, but under that, you got to remember, under that code at that time when the building was built, they didn't have to have the entire building sprinkled. And I will tell you, there's never been a loss of life in a fully sprinkled building other than a plane flying into it. So they work. So after the fire, the whole 40-story buildings displaced. People were in hotels for 18 to 20 months. We went back to the homeowners association of that building, and this is a very ritzy building. I mean, and we tried to convince them to go ahead and sprinkle their apartments. It was going to cost about $5,000 a unit.
Mm-hmm.
They had lost a tenant. They'd been displaced for 20 plus months, and we lost a firefighter, and they still would not do it. Now, they spend more at Neiman Marcus in one day than they do at the cost of that sprinkler, but they won't do it. So unless you make it law, they're not going to do it. So, of course, now we see, even in restaurants, then they had the pyrotechnic accidents. Any restaurant that's of any square footage that serves alcohol or food has to be sprinkled, because they were saying before that, you could be sprinkled. And you got to remember, will is permissive, shall has to be done. So they've done that. And those corrections, they're saving lives. They're saving lives.
I spent 13 years at FM Global. And I drank the Kool-Aid when it came to sprinkler protection.
So that's the side of the construction side, the fire safety side of it that I know, that which brought me to construction of where I am now.
So let's talk about now and being in the engineering world. So, I mean, I ask this, and I still sometimes get different answers, but I guess it depends. So as far as when it comes to engineering, and let's just say from before you're breaking ground, who's typically bringing the engineer to the table? Is it the owner? Is it the GC? Is it the architect? How does the relationship in the process of engineering get brought to the table?
Well, usually it's the civils. The civil engineers are going to bring us in via the owners. The owners hire us typically, unless it's a design build. And there's some great firms out there that do some great design build projects. And they'll bring us in. But typically what we'll do is the civils want to know what's in the ground. What are they building on? What's underneath the dirt? So they'll hire us. They'll hire a geotechnical company to come out. And there's different types. You just have geotechnical companies that will just go out and punch the ground and tell you what's in it. And then you have firms like ours that will punch the ground, tell you what's in it, give that to the civils. The civils design your slab. It goes to the architect. They design the building. Everybody comes to an agreement, and then they hire their contractors, and away we go. But we are there, and we are hired by the owners and developers to protect the owners and the developers. Your city or state inspector, whoever's involved in that area, is going to do their inspections, but we go further and we have more stringent, as you know, more stringent inspections that we have to do, especially in the soil. It all starts with the foundation.
Yeah.
And if you're not building on a properly compacted land, or you don't know the moisture content of that soil and what's going to happen, you could end up with water under your slabs, or depending on how deep you're having to go down with your piers, did you go down far enough to hit bedrock? Because that's what we have to be built on, unless it's clay and then you're using frictional type piers, which can be done, but you have to know what's in there. So that's what we do. We come out, we'll test the soil, we turn that over to the civil engineers, and then they go after it. The problems come in when you have a firm that's maybe underbid the job, or is not very experienced, and they get in there and they're not going to the code, or they're not going and following what the civils have recommended. And there are also some things that just happen. I mean, things happen on construction sites.
Sure.
And what we do is get involved, and we either pass or fail those different inspections that we're doing. But what we do is we send those reports immediately over to the civil engineers. It's up to the civil engineer to make that decision and run it by the owner, because, you know, it's basically what we're doing here. And you can understand this from your position in your business, right? It's a shell game of passing liability is what we're doing. Who's going to take this liability of this, and who's going to accept it, and who's going to sign off on it? So our job is to limit that liability as much as we can to the owner and the developer of that property, because they've got 10-year liability on this thing on residential after it's built. So knowing how that slab is built, that the tiebacks are done, the piers are done correctly. We have different methodologies of testing that we do, like on their piers that go down. You could go down to 100 to 150 feet. But you want to know, okay, is the cage, the rebar cage that's going down into that casing, into the ground, that it stays uniform in conformity how it's done. Sometimes you get down there and it bangs, it goes down, it gets separated or collapses, and then you start pouring the concrete in there. You get a water pocket, air pocket in there or whatever. But we do what's called gamma testing, where we'll run down a PVC pipe right next to that casing. And as it's being poured and it's filling up, we are looking at that hole in that cage and making sure that pier and the integrity of that cage is maintained, and that the air and water and powder is getting vibrated out. Yeah, which gives you a solid. Because if you remember the Miami incident that happened, yes, and I hate to relate to that, because that was not so much from engineering as it was just lack of people doing what they should have been doing. Yeah, they started pulling up these piers out of the ground. This had nothing to do, I believe, with the whole collapse thing. But from what I do know of the report, that they started dissecting some of these piers, and they were looking at the piers and the cages that actually collapsed. So when the cages collapsed, everybody understands how steel disperses the weight, and it's not very dispersed if it's all clumped together like that. It's not doing what it's engineered to do. So that's where we're involved, and we come in to do these tests to make sure everybody's doing exactly what they're supposed to be doing.
Yeah. So there's a lot of things I want to jump on here and kind of go off on some tangents maybe a little bit, but there's a lot of people, a lot of companies coming to Texas to do work. And there's a lot of, you and I were just talking about how Williamson County, north of Austin, is exploding. That's where I went to college in Georgetown, Southwestern. Can you maybe give us, if someone's watching this and they're thinking about coming to Texas, or they got a project, maybe want to build something in Texas, maybe in a snapshot, could you maybe talk about where the different parts of Texas, and maybe what are some of the different complexities as far as the engineering, if you might, just at a high level? Because like you mentioned clay, and that's why I live in basically that clay stuff's up here in North Texas. And I can tell you, everybody who's in Texas, you can buy a house, no matter how old it is, make sure you got a good foundation repair guy, because eventually you're going to need it. Because this clay just moves left and right. Can you talk about maybe what some of the different, I mean, it's a big state and there's different regions. So what do you see as some of the engineering, what are some of the difficulties in being in different parts of the state?
Well, and that's in Austin, Texas, Central Texas. It's in Dallas, and you get into Houston. You can go up the north side of Dallas or north side of Austin, and it's nothing but rock and limestone. You know, you get near the capital, you get 6 inches down, you're already at bedrock.
Yeah.
But then you get over toward where the Tesla plant is, toward the east side of Austin.
Mm-hmm.
Now you're into clay, shale, limestone, sand, and it gets really ugly. So, and these large development companies that are coming in doing these multifamily or home master plan communities are coming in. And bottom line is that the slabs are just not, they're not done properly. They're not compacted correctly. They're not, the soil. You can build anything on clay. You have to treat it right. Yeah. You just have to have the slab design right. So they what they try to do, Brian, they get away. Some of these engineers for these home manufacturers will come in and do like a post tension, so they can come in and kind of grab it back together and kind of pull it back together. But everything's going to move. We all know that. The land is, the earth's crust is constantly moving. So that's why you do the geotech, drill down, figure out what's in that soil and how much is it going to move and what type of soil that you do have to where you can build on it. Like I said, with clay, it's a frictional type of piers that they're going to use to disperse the weight across evenly. But again, make sure the soil is compacted. You're not getting any water in there, and that it's a safe slab.
Yeah. So obviously that kind of leads to current conditions, and we're going to talk about as far as where we are now and going to the future with respects to climate change and issues that are occurring. And so I'd be curious, Michael, for what you're seeing right now when you and your company are looking at projects and you're dealing with developers. I mean, I having worked with developers, and there's different kinds, like anything else. There's those who want to build it, sell it, move on, build it, move on, versus others who maybe want to have a long-term investment. Do you see a difference in regards to, certain developers or owners as far as those who see the big picture and can think about the long term versus those who are just trying to get the quick buck?
Yes, what I call like the tech dots of the world. Yeah. They're building something that's our tax dollars. They need something that lasts 70, 80 years. Yeah. And then you'll have other companies, and I'm not going to name names, but you have companies that will come in and throw up large light industrial projects and then turn them and sell them. Yep. Then you have some that will manage them for 5 and 6 years. They want to get some return out of it. And they understand what the market's doing here in Austin, that it's going to grow. They're going to make more money on. So they'll tend to hold on to those more so than the other companies that just want to turn and burn and keep going. The bottom line, they all want it to be built right. So your parking lots don't chum up. You notice, and I've noticed this, Brian, even parking lots in these light industrial areas, you don't have, remember the old pothole used to go through place, there are potholes everywhere. The concrete was chumming up and cracking up. Yep. Well, that's coming from our testing, the improvements in the testing. Like we'll do cylinder test off the pores of the concrete. Mm-hmm. And, some of these places, if we go back and actually look at that concrete, it probably did not meet the standard of what the civil designed it for. So that's why you're having all your cracking. And then you look at the rebar, it's maybe really close to the surface. It's not on, wouldn't put on chairs properly and wasn't at the right height off of the surface of the ground. And it caused to have all those problems. You don't have that anymore. And you have some very good companies out there, Extreme and Presidian and some other ones, Kyroid Lincoln, that are really doing great jobs on their inspection side and making sure these things are done right, because they also know it is a safety and a health hazard as well. Mm-hmm.
Very good. So I'm curious in these environments, and I don't want to put the words in your mouth because I have an opinion on this, or I think I do. When you guys are out there and you're working on projects, how much of a conversation have you seen in respects to, matter of before you build it, someone's got unless someone's paying it for themselves, they're going to have to go get a loan, and they're going to have to get insured. And so the insurance carriers will sometimes get heavily, like my old firm FM, will come out and be heavily involved in looking at the design and process. Are you seeing any more conversation, or at least it's being more brought into the conversation respects to, we need to build it like this so that we can get an insurance? Or if we don't build it, we're not going to get insurance this way. I mean, the concept of resilience, as far as how much of a conversation is resilience being brought into your projects these days?
Not much, because once the civils and the architects speak, it's done. Okay. I mean, we're done with it, and this is the way it's going to be built. And that's the way it has to be built. Yeah. And they're going to design it and to where you can get built, because that's the last thing they want to do is get get into litigation because they didn't build it correctly, where you or your company would come out and insure it.
Yeah, correct.
So, and the owners, they're being very responsible to where that's, they want to make sure it is insurable. I mean, because their investors are involved and they're involved, and they don't want to be a part of something that's uninsurable. It's not a safe building or a safe site. It all starts with the site, Ryan, as far as that dirt, getting it done, and then going, like they always say, your foundation from the ground up.
Because like early in the year, there was a great article in the New York Times talking about how developers were not going forward with some projects like in South Beach, Miami, because they couldn't get insurance for it. Because where they were looking to build it in projection as far as rising sea levels and water penetration on hurricanes, it was just going to start becoming more and more uninsurable, or at least, maybe get.
And in those areas, I'll agree, along your coastlines and things like that. And plus, looking at the soil from Miami, we have an office there as well. And and you go down a few feet, you're already in water. So you start dealing with casings, and how long before you hit bedrock, and how sturdy is that bedrock. So I would agree that that's probably happening in those areas. But here in Central Texas, we're the least seismic area in the world, I believe, and this which goes to most of our engineers and our inspectors are all seismic rated, even though they're not. We don't have anything to worry about here. You get Houston, you got some fault lines, things like that. But it just goes to the dedication of these inspectors that want to do this job, but they're taking it serious.
Good. And I'll take this moment. Anybody who's actually watching this conversation live, you have the ability to go ahead and submit a question. Just go ahead and look at the bottom right-hand corner. There's a box there that you can submit your comments. Please go ahead and add it there, and it'll pop up, and then I will bring it on for Michael's attention. We'll address it. So, Michael, at this point, I'm kind of curious, as you think about the world of engineering, what are you seeing right now as far as the world of engineering right now, as far as what are some of the risks to the industry, in the sense that, I mean, are there enough people? Do you have a lot of people retiring and no one coming on the backside, which seems to be the case for a lot of like construction? And then where do you see the future of engineering from at least your perspective, as far as whether adoption of new technologies or whatever the case?
Well, I think a majority of what's been invented is, like they say, has been invented, but it seems like always somebody's pulling something out. There'll be something new theory or new process that's going to come out. Yeah. I'm very happy and very comfortable going into commercial buildings now that I know, especially now that I'm more up to date on the codes and watching the inspection side of how things are built. I was very leery of getting into high rises before. That's just not my thing. Yeah. But now I understand them. Understand them very well, and I'm not afraid of them at all. I love going up in them. It just went up. Oh, I can't wait to go in to get into 6 in Guadalupe, and then of course the water line. When that's done, water line is supposed to be, I think, 1,440 feet, or 1,140 feet. 1,440 is in New York, but they're using higher pressure, compaction concrete. We're using 13,000 psi concrete on there. Yeah. So, but. And then watching, how these inspectors are doing and the buildings are being built, I'm very comfortable getting into them. And the problem is that we have an issue like everybody else with staffing. It's just not there for some reason, even though we got 15 million unemployed people. Yeah. It's just construction industry. There's not any trades. You're looking at, I think around here, I heard in Austin, the average framer was 56 years of age. And before, those were jobs, Brian, that you and I were taught in high school, and doing industrial science classes where you learned how to build things or work with your hands. And you don't see that anymore. So we're now seeing that in our trades with, even electrical contractors are having difficulty getting basic electricians out there to do the work. And these guys are making $30 to $50 an hour. Coming out of high school, they could, but they don't want to do that. So we're all struggling with that. And I have a big problem with that, because these owners are, catering to everybody and giving them pickleball and, de-stress lounges and everything else just to come to work, which, you and I years ago is like, man, you go to work so you can make a living.
So obviously, Michael, you're right there in the heart. Your office is in Austin, so it's obviously one of the fastest growing parts of the country right now.
Yes.
What are your observations right now? What's going on in Austin with the market?
I go to all the different conferences, Brian, and I keep hearing all the panelists talk about how there's going to be a slowdown. there's going to be this, there's going to be that. And then I'm sitting next to some of my customers and they're looking at each other saying, you go ahead and slow down and I'll run you over. And I do think that should be the mentality, because I think if here in Austin, Texas, since everything else appears to be slowing down in the country, everywhere else, the interest rates, you can always go back and buy down your interest rate and redo things. But I think it would be more cost prohibitive to stop what we're doing and wait and let things start catching up than it is just to keep going and let's get these things built. We're already behind the 8 ball. We have, you have everybody in there. It's anybody in technology is here. We've seen Samsung here. We've got Tesla here. You've got all these different companies that are needing large spaces to operate, and we're going to slow down. That doesn't make any sense. And I think now's the time that we can get the products. Before, if you remember, if you didn't order your windows on a large vertical building 18 months in advance, you weren't getting them on time. Yeah. And that was 36 months later. Yeah. So now everything's slowing down to where, okay, we're able to get products and services at a faster rate. Let's keep building and let's get, we have 1 million, I think the number we heard, Brian, was 1.4 million rooftops over the next 5 years. Yeah. How do we do that? Yeah. We don't do it by slowing down. No. So the money's there. Some of the things that I'm seeing, some of the financiers are coming in trying to hedge their bets. They're heavily in the Northeast or the West, and it's slow there. So they're coming in here to invest here to kind of hedge it off, because they know Austin's growing. And I've heard numbers of the next 30 to 40 years, Austin's going to be growing. And I don't doubt it with the size of what Samsung alone is going to do. They're going to bring 28,000 people in that poor little community of Taylor, Texas. They don't know what's hit them. I know. And then, of course, you have Tesla. They've got Tesla. You have their boring tunneling company, which is, I think, 2.5 miles to the east. And then to the south of that, they have their SpaceX. So in that triangulation there, the Tesla's just going to blow up that area. Where are they going to work? Where are they going to eat? Where are they going to live? And how are they going to get there? So slowing down is not the answer to me, but I'm not the one controlling the purse strings.
So got a question coming in here from Mr. Emmett Coots, general contractor, owner of Stute GC here in Dallas, Texas. He's got a question for you, Michael. Would you ever consider not building a project if a client wanted to not have sprinklers in the building to avoid the liability? Classification of the building aside, especially if there has never been a loss in life in a sprinkler building, why would you not? Right. So, the question is, it's like almost, I think it's like at this point, like it's current, like you're going to get sprinklers no matter what. Yeah. Period. You can't. Yeah. I don't think you can not have sprinklers. Like homes, individual homes, you're not required to, but I can tell you from the larger homes, the kind of places that you see on Succession. Those typically the ones I don't live in. Yeah,
anything over 10,000 square feet is going to have a sprinkler in it.
Got sprinklers, exactly, because that's also the point, and that's almost like because the carriers are going to want to have it, and they're not going to insure it unless it is in there. So I think it's kind of a point. To the point is, to Emmett's point, I think there's really not much of an option.
There's no, especially being a firefighter in my past experience, and until you've seen the tragedy of a fire and what it does to a family and losing a loved one in a building. I'm trying to figure out, when I build, we're redoing a 100-year-old farmhouse right now in Taylor, Texas. And I want to figure out how I can put in my sprinkler system, and I'm going to do it. They save lives and they save property. And the worst you're going to get out of is some water damage with some sheetrock. So, get that fire contained and knock it down and live to see another day and keep your possessions. So to me, it's not an option. Yeah. So,
well, Emmett, thanks for great question, Emmett. Thank you so much. Again, if anybody'd like to have another question, please go ahead and submit it. Just like Emmett did, I'd be more happy to bring it to Michael's attention. So Michael, obviously, getting towards, conscious of time here. So obviously we've covered a lot of respects to engineering and where we are now and go in the future. But I would like to also give you the opportunity to talk about maybe some of the outside foundation that you're currently working with.
Yeah, we, my wife and I, recently lost our son, 24 years of age, to leukemia. And, it's sad. It's very heart-wrenching, and it was emotional, and it's still emotional. We're in what we call the aftermath. But then to find out that this is happening to a group of kids between 18 and 30, which is our kids that we're going to be hiring, and I call them kids, young adults.
Yeah.
His was an exposure, was a non-genetic leukemia, which the G level over at MD Anderson in Houston has 85 beds in that hospital, and it's turning every 6 days with these kids, and nobody is saying anything. And also these kids are sometimes alone because their family members cannot be with them, which is just heart-wrenching in itself. It wasn't an option for me and my wife.
Yeah.
We were there. Somebody was always with my son every day. And it only took 9 months to take him, which was sad. We thought we had it beat.
Yeah.
He rang the cancer-free bell, and then it came back and reared its ugly head and came back with a vengeance and took him. Yeah. And it's very upsetting, but we can either sit here and be sad and wallow in this and our pain, which there's a great deal of it, or we can try to do something positive. And the positive side of it is called the Zachary Cole Foundation. It's ZCF, Zachary Cole Foundation.life. And it's a very informative website. It'll tell you everything that we're doing. We are there to assist the patients that are battling leukemia and their families to bridge those financial barriers that keep them apart during their treatments and then what we call the aftermath. Mm-hmm. It's all my years as a firefighter paramedic could have never prepared me for what I went through with Zach. No. And what my wife and I are going through. No. But the problem is it could happen to anybody. It was an exposure. Zach was on field since he was in 8th grade. So did it come from there, the Roundup? Did it come from chemicals in my garage that emitted vapors and went into ambient air and went in with our house? I don't know, but they're not going to find a cure for cancer. That seems evident to me. Mm-hmm. So let's try. It's simple business. Let's try to limit our risks, minimize our risks. And that's through education of what are we doing with our kids? What are we putting on these fields they're playing on? The fertilizers, the Roundups, everything else that's out there. Yeah. Try to minimize this because I would not wish this on anybody, what my wife and I are going through. No. And his brother and sister. It's been very tragic. Again, we thought we had it beat. Zachary was bigger than life. Made such an impact on people. And so we fired up our website, zcf.life, and we are starting to raise resources to be able to help these families. On October 5th, we're doing the Let's Build This Gala in Austin, Texas for the Zachary Cole Foundation. And then on April 19th, which is actually Zach's death day, it'll be the first day we start helping families, which will be a new birthday for him. So anything we can do to try to help these families to avoid what we went through. Our employers were just great to us. They paid us, and we were very lucky. Yeah. But there are people who don't have that, Brian. They aren't that lucky, and they have family medical leave, which just means you're not going to get fired. You still got to pay the insurance. Yeah. You still got to help and raise your family and do things. Life continues on. So there's nothing for them. So we don't want people giving any more. We're just trying to raise 1 cent for every dollar given to cancer research, and try to give it to the people that are actually experiencing these heartaches and this terrible disease. Yeah. So I appreciate you letting me talk about that.
Sure.
It's very dear to me.
No, and of course, Michael, and as a father, I can't.
Yeah.
Yeah. But that being the point, my understanding, your son was going to be going into the construction trade, correct?
Correct. He had first lined up. He was going to be selling heart valves. Yeah. And then he was at the NC2A national track meet when he found out he was after he'd come back during that time during the track meet, and he ended up ranking 19th in the world in the hammer, which is a big 16-pound ball. He was throwing 57 meters. Yeah. We found out he had leukemia. Yeah. So that job went away, but it looked like we were going to beat it. And Ruddick Construction offered him a job. There's like, you kidding? They don't make these kids anymore like this. We want him on our team. Yeah. So they began to get close with Zachary, and then of course things turned for the wrong and for the worst, and he ended up passing. But he was excited. I'd take him around with me to some of my events and introduce him to people, and people would gravitate to him. He was just that guy. He was almost 6'7", 300 pounds, in shape, athlete, and people gravitated to that. He almost looked like Thor. I mean, that's what people liken him to. So
No,
if you go to the website, you can see a great
I agree with that. I think it's a good way to describe him.
Yeah, but it's a great cause and a great foundation, and there's a lot of information on there, Brian, on the website, and we make no bones about it. We are not about research.
Yep.
They've been researching for 100 years,
yep,
trillions of dollars, and all they've got is chemotherapy. I'm sorry, but I want to help people. I just want, and that's been my nature. So,
and correct me if I'm wrong, but you have members of the construction community involved with the board?
Yes, I have. Lee Sawyer is a great friend, and
good man.
With Reddick Construction, we have Wes Wigington with Foursquare, builds these multi-million-dollar homes there in Westlake.
Yeah,
and we've got my sister who is a paralegal. She's on the board of the Texas Paralegal Association. My wife is associated on the board. She's with Rosendin Electric. I'm with Fenagh Engineering. I'm on the board, and my daughter, who is with Smart Charge America, they're putting up these chargers everywhere. She's on the board, and then we also have other people that are there with companies, HPI and Stream, and other companies that are helping us and lending a hand because they understand.
Yeah.
So everybody I've talked to has said the same thing. They want to give, but they want results, and we're not getting results with what we're seeing. And I don't understand, Brian, is like with you or me, if we were coming up with something, they wouldn't keep throwing money at us. They would give us a mandate. You figure this out or we're done.
Yeah.
And here we're 100 years into this, and God bless them. We need the research. I'm not saying we don't.
No.
But we also need to help these people.
Understood.
We really do.
No, we do. No, and I think it's, we talk a lot on my show, whether this or 60 Seconds to Roast, the concept is talking about, things, helping people understand and the unexpected. And times, people don't think about long-term care insurance, what that costs, or even like what the impact is to families, because someone, like to your point, someone's got to be driving to and from and staying with a sick kid in a hospital. And that
we'll give you an example. We spent over $4,000 in parking in 9 months going to the hospital. Parking. You're not talking about the food we had to buy our son because the hospital food was horrendous.
Yeah.
And just the traveling back and forth. Luckily, we were able to stay with my sister. But you add up all these costs, and then you get somebody who's, Brian, let's say they're making $100,000 a year combined income. They're bankrupt. They're done. Yeah. And then it gets into the family where the family breaks up. Within 18 months, they're divorced. It's just sad. And this wasn't a bad decision, Brian. This is something that was dealt to them.
It's dealt.
So, and Americans and everybody that I know in the construction, they're very giving and very sympathetic, and they're heartfelt. And it's been what I've been experiencing right now. Everybody's been reaching out, and how can we help? Because the thing you don't ask somebody after going through this is how you do it.
Yeah.
That, and you don't listen to country music. So,
no, I can imagine that. No, so a little more.
But I appreciate it.
No,
but if everyone would go to ccf.life and look at it, we'd appreciate it and share it on with your friends. We are also a 97% foundation, that's not heard of before.
Yeah,
where 97% of our money is going to the recipients and who we're helping. So hopefully we'll have some good luck at it, and Zach will have a great legacy.
Hey, Michael, thank you so much for your insight. Thanks for sharing about not only your background in fire protection and engineering, but also about your family and what you're.
Well, I appreciate it. I appreciate it.
Yeah,
I've been very blessed, even though God's not finished testing me yet. I've got a great family.
Yes, you do. God bless you, sir, and to your family.
All right. Thank you very much.
You bet. So, everybody, I hope you enjoyed this episode of Risk on, Risk Off. I mean, obviously, kind of a little peek behind the curtain respects to engineering and what it's involved and how the engineers are there to try to build something that's going to last. Obviously, Michael has a great background with respects to fire protection and safety. As a result, he's seen, unfortunately, buildings burned down, and he was running in when people are running out. So he's seen the worst case. But I think it definitely shows where all it sort of comes together respects to, engineering and resiliency and insurance and risk, as far as the intent is to build to be more resilient, and if something goes wrong, hopefully mitigate the potential calamity that might occur. And obviously very grateful to Michael for sharing his family's background, respects to the loss of his son. I can tell you, with 2 daughters, I would have a hard time thinking about that. And the whole point of these shows is to try to provide some information that you guys can think about, learn from other people, and therefore you can make some informed decisions, because, you know, we all know not everything goes with the plan, and you've got to have the ability to sort of withstand the punch. So as always, hope you guys enjoyed the show. Please reach out to me, send me a note post on LinkedIn if you wish to find a certain topic or individual I should interview on this show. I'm always looking for ideas. And you can also be able to find this video with the rest of these prior videos on my YouTube channel. Until next time, everybody.